Hello and welcome to another episode of Pause for Payments. I'm Kristy Duncan and I'm delighted to be here today with Valeria Strappa, who's Managing Director of Integration Leader Wholesale Payments at J.P. Morgan, and she's based in Frisco, Texas. Welcome, Val.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Kristy.
It's a pleasure. Today, we are going to talk about M&A business integration. And this is a topic that perhaps many of you haven't heard about, so we're going to learn all about it from Val. The process of bringing companies together with the aim of synergizing and ensuring a smooth integration is a delicate but interesting journey. And Val, you live this day to day, so I want to hear more about this. Let's start by telling the audience about your role and how that all works.
So let me tell you about my role with J.P. Morgan. So when I joined J.P. Morgan 5 years ago as the CIO of Merchant Services, one of my primary goals was to integrate Merchant Services to the bank. So as you know, Merchant Services was a joint venture with First Data. When we spinned off, Merchant Services was a company. They operated as an independent business. And one of my goals was to integrate Merchant Service as a product with J.P. Morgan. So that was a very nice experience, trying to integrate a mature company with J.P. Morgan as my first role. So that was a very, very nice experience to integrate a large company with another huge bank. So after 2.5 years in that role, where I led the strategic initiatives for that business, including integration, we acquired InstaMed. InstaMed is a healthcare payments company, and we needed to bring those two, that company together with J.P. Morgan. So what we were trying to accomplish was to create or build an industry ecosystem, an industry-focused ecosystem of payments. So the beauty of this integration is that I had the opportunity to run the integration end-to-end, from business strategy to systems to controls. So I was able to see it all through. But I would say that the most relevant integration was the cultural integration. And I know we will talk about culture a little bit later, but that's my role. It was how to successfully integrate fintechs with very large banks. I think that beyond the integration of InstaMed was how can we successfully integrate and accelerate the integration of fintechs into a banking system.
Wow, that sounds like a huge, huge job, Val. I'm really intrigued. And I'm sure that automation, optimization, and culture, as you've mentioned, are just a few of the important elements doing one of these M&A integrations. Can you tell us about that, and why did you start focusing on integrations?
Yeah, I think I didn't, it wasn't something that I pursued, but my background is consulting. So when I started my career, I started with McKinsey. And what McKinsey did for me was gave me the analytical and strategy framework to then break down big problems in pieces and simplify the outcome and then execute. So when I left McKinsey to G Consumer Finance, what they were looking for was two things. One, bring new talent to the team that could build, turn around, or integrate businesses, because it was a very young organization. And I did those three. I launched the business, the retail business to consumer, the first business that G had created that way. I turned around the business, but then in my third job, what I did was integrate the different portfolios that they had acquired in Latin America. So basically, I focused on the CEO strategy, the CEO agenda. And what CEOs look for is growth, synergies, controls, right? It pivots around those, and innovation and transformations, those 3 to 5 topics. And the way many times you accomplish or deliver against those goals is through integration. We integrate businesses, business models, processes, and that simplifies businesses. Then you can extract synergies, you reduce the level of risk, you can gain scale. So that's how I got into this world of integration. And I think I've done this throughout my career, regardless of the job that I was in. When you think about how can we improve the client experience, how can we improve what the relationship with the clients, many times it's improving processes and integrating channels so you have an omni-channel experience. So it's not necessarily just about how you integrate a company, but how do you bring that mindset of integration, regardless of what role you're in.
Wow, this sounds really interesting and multifaceted with your growth and your synergies and the control and the integration, the process and the scale. You've got a lot of different moving parts. I can't imagine how you keep it all straight. So what do you find the most interesting and challenging, Val, in this role?
I think the most interesting part is when you bring these two companies or processes or functions together, when 1 + 1 = 4. So it's not about just bringing them together and deliver what they delivered before. It's how do we bring these two entities together and we exponentiate what they do. So it's not about preserving the value, it's about making that value exponential. And to me, when you see that happening, it's like magic, but you can tell that I'm very passionate about it, but it's really amazing when you see that happening. I think the most challenging part of the role, as you said before, is, or you alluded before, is there are many moving pieces, but it's usually culture. It's the culture, bringing the culture together, making those two entities or those two companies feel that they have a common goal at the end of the time. You can have many differences, you can have different approaches, but if you have a common goal and a good governance process to manage those differences, I think it's very doable, but it's very challenging at the same time.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, and talking about challenges, I'm sure that one of your key objectives is to manage and avoid potential risks. Is there some secret formula to integrating a business to navigate those potential risks? And how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's managing the risk, of course, and it's also protecting the asset that you acquire. Because many times when you acquire a company, I think you can go to the two extremes. Either you leave the acquired company on their own, hence you never really accomplish or you never deliver the expected value because the synergies never happen, or you integrate way too soon or too much, and then you suffocate and you dilute the value that you acquired. So I think we call, the way we do it is we develop this framework of 4 S's and a very strong governance process. So before we acquire a company, I think it's important to have very clear what is the spirit of the acquisition. What is the rationale for why we are acquiring this company, or for why we are integrating this process, or why are we trying to merge these two business models. I think that's where everything starts, because with that North Star in mind, then everything else comes together, right? It's easier to identify what is aligning to that goal and what it's not. The second one is before the due diligence starts, or maybe during the due diligence as well, even before the acquisition starts, is what is the statement of that integration? And by statement, I mean, what are the things that we need to preserve and the things we are not going to negotiate? So when there's a new company or a new business coming together, what are the things that I need to preserve? No matter what controls, no matter what policies, we need to find a way to preserve the value that we acquire. But on the other hand, what are those things that we're not going to negotiate as an acquiring company? Because those are critical to maintain the bigger company's identity and also to preserve the company from any incremental risk. So to me, that statement, it's super important, and that is something that now the spirit we defined, on our own. It's the acquiring company that defines it. But then the statement is something that has to be early on shared with the acquired company to make sure that both parties agree what are the value added and untouchables and the non-negotiables, because that drives so much clarity and eliminates so much friction in the process. As we go through the due diligence, that's when we start shaping the strategy of that integration, because we learn a lot more about the processes, and each function can start delineating what is that checklist and how are we going to integrate, what's the sequence of that integration. And once that strategy is in place and we are very close to closing the deal, then is how do we define the structure, which is what you alluded to before as well, is how do we preserve the company from increasing the risk? So it's the structure of the integration, which work streams, and how are we going to work together? How are we going to integrate? How are we going to escalate? How are we going to manage our differences and without creating disruption? So I think those 4 steps are what we are very conscious about and very structured about. That's with my team, we developed that playbook, and I think it's proven very successful.
Wow, this is really, really interesting, Val. I like the way the engineer in me likes the way that you've got this into these 4 S's. So you've got the spirit of the acquisition. Why are we doing it? What's going to be the fantastic endpoint, the statement of the integration on, what is and what isn't negotiable, the strategy on how we're going to actually do this that we figure out during the whole due diligence process, but then the structure of how do we actually preserve the value and come to an endpoint that everybody is happy with and gets to that. I love this 1 + 1 = 4. I've never heard that before.
Yes. Yeah, and maybe you like the structure because we're both engineers, so that's the engineer in us. So
exactly, engineers are good.
Yes.
So this is really interesting. You've got this really rewarding role, and I want to ask from your perspective, and we talked a little bit about structure and tech backgrounds and stuff, but from your perspective, what do you think are the skills required to integrate a business, and how have these helped you in your career, Val?
Very, very interesting and really great question. I think, of course, you have to understand the business. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to understand the business that you're trying to integrate. That's a given. I think having a very strong sense of structure, framework, I think it's everything, and it may come across as a little bureaucratic, but having a very good structured approach to integration, I think, or approach to what you do in different roles, it's really important. So structure, strategic thinking, analytical skills, but also I would say very, very important is the ability to manage change. And I can't emphasize enough what it means. Sometimes when we talk about change management, it's taken very lightly because people might think about change management as communication or training. And it's way beyond those two things, which are part of change management. But I remember when I went through my Six Sigma certification, and we went through a training that was change acceleration program. And I think back those days, I didn't understand, or I underestimated the value of that framework back in my GE days. But change management is about reading the culture, reading the needs of the different players. In the end, as Peter Drucker said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast, meaning that it doesn't matter how effective your strategy is, culture will set the tone for how successful you are. So change management is about understanding people's drivers, people's incentives, and how do you make them come together? How do you bring the teams along? And I think that's, and how do you tell the story in a very clear and compelling way? So I think when you bring structure, strategy, and change management together, you understand what people need and what people fears. I think it's even more important is what is people fearing? So what is the acquired company fear? What are the fears to join a larger company? Oh, I fear I will lose my identity. I fear I will lose my speed and agility because I'm joining a huge bank. Banks can be fearful of controls. Am I acquiring a company that we are going to be able to control, that it's going to add value, not increment risk? So once you understand that, and then you have clarity around the spirit and the strategy of that acquisition, and you can communicate in a simple and compelling way that story, and then take time to build one-on-one relationships and bring the teams along together. I think those are really important skills. So I would say again, very strong program management skills, strategic approach, and deep change management skills. Those three, you can name many others, but those three I think are the most critical ones.
Wow. And clearly you've done a very good job of developing those skills to a fantastic level to get to you to where you are today. Val, this has been a really great discussion, and I love your perspectives and how you approach this whole, I mean, this is a big, big job, is managing an integration, and you don't have a lot of room to, for error or to get it wrong, for sure. You have had this fantastic career, and I understand you might be doing something a little different going forward. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe share some of your career tips that might be of interest to the rising stars in our audience?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so months ago, I took a new role internally. Now I am the head of liquidity and account services for the Americas. That means Canada, North America, and Latin America. So this is a big job that I am very excited about, very thankful to my boss, Lori Schwartz, for giving me this opportunity. She's a star, and I'm thrilled to be part of this new team. And I think this, to start answering your question about tips, I think it's all about building transferable skills. So being a subject matter expert, it's really, really important in many cases, but building skills that will help you adjust to different roles, to different situations is very important. So that is number one. Identify transferable skills that you want to develop, particularly in this world, in this changing world that evolves, where flexibility is one of the most important skills. What are those transferable skills that you want to build in your career? Number two, I think, is jump at the challenge, right? Or to the challenge. Whenever you're given an opportunity, take measured risks, but go for it. Because what is the worst that can happen, right? That's the way I see it. Every time a huge challenge was put in front of me, I've always said yes, because that's the way to grow. That's the way how you. I believe in flexible. I think that limits are flexible. So when you think, as J.P. Morgan said, right, go as far as you can, and when you get there, you will see even farther. It's the same thing at work. Like, do something that you think it's the most challenging thing you can do, and once you've done it, then you look back and say, oh, that was pretty good, and now I'm ready for the next challenge. So never shy away from a good challenge, right?
I love that.
Yes, and then last I would say is make sure you solve right challenges. You solve right problems that have either the opportunity to make the company grow, that are in the strategic agenda of big leaders, regardless of what you get for yourself. Because if you are able to do that, and you do that with passion because that's something that you like, the reward will come later. And many times you don't even have to look for that reward. So that would be my advice. I don't want to say don't be selfish, but it's don't be self-centric. Think about what you can give, because then you will receive rewards from what you do for your company. That has been my experience, at least.
Wow, such great words of inspiration, and they all ring so true. I love that, building transferable skills. And you talked about that earlier, about you've got this fantastic expertise integrating, M&A targets, but now you're going to take some of those amazing skills and bring it into the whole world of liquidity management, and not only learn, but develop your own skills and bring other skills to that area. So that's fantastic. Rising to challenges. Here's yet another challenge in your career to learn about and add value to another whole part of the bank. That's really, really exciting. So we will take your cue and look for and rise to those challenges. But solving the right problems, I think you're right. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Correct.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Val, this has been an absolutely amazing discussion. I've been so inspired. I've learned so much about the world of M&A integration, but also about the world of building a career with skills that we can build out, getting that 1 + 1 = 4, both in what we do at work, but in our careers is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. And thank you again. Thank you for having me. And I hope it's been helpful and inspiring. That's a very nice accomplishment. So thank you very much for having me here.
Oh, it's been an absolute delight. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. I'm going to encourage everybody to join us for the many other Pause for Payments episodes, where we invite amazing women from around the world of payments, like Val, to join us for some fantastic discussions on building careers and doing fantastic things in the payments industry around the world. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kristy. And thank you for everything you do. This is great. And all the work you're doing for women in payments, it's just fabulous. Thank you for all your hard work and amazing work.
Couldn't do it without you. Thanks so much.